Hello everybody, welcome to our channel Full Stack Developer, the channel that will boost your productivity as a full stack developer. In this video, we are going to create a web API with .NET serving a front end with React.js. This application will be contained in a Docker container and we will be deployed together in a Kubernetes environment. So to follow this tutorial, you should have already these requirements: Minikube to emulate Kubernetes in your local environment, Docker to create our container, Node.js for the front-end part, .NET for creating a web API, and finally a text editor to edit deployments files. After creating this container, we are going to create a Kubernetes deployment to deploy our container on the multiple pods, and then we are going to create a service in order to expose our application for public clients. This content is just for developers who want to test how their containers work in the cloud. It's not meant for DevOps who are seeking advanced knowledge for Kubernetes. So let's start creating our container. Let's start by creating a terminal. And in this terminal, I'm going to create a folder called My Application. This folder will be considered as the root folder for my Docker container. So here I'm gonna start by creating a .NET application, which would be called server, and then I'm gonna create a React application with the framework Vite. Let's call it front end React. We are going to create also a Docker config file in order to create our image. Let's now open this folder with VS Code. So let's activate serving static files in our server. So here in program.js, I'm gonna say that I want my server to use default files in order to load the index.html file first, and then I want static files to be used here. So my server will serve static files in a folder called www root folder. Let's now go back to our Docker file and we're going to create our first stage, which will be called backend build. And in this stage, I'm gonna load here the .NET SDK version 7. And I'm going to say that the work there will be app. In this stage, I'm gonna copy all the server folder here onto the app folder, and then I'm gonna run .NET restore in order to load all the nuggets, and then I'm gonna publish the application in a folder called out here. Let's now create the second stage, which is the front-end stage. So I'm gonna use Node.js version 18, and the stage will be called build front. The work there will be the same as the first one, which is app. And then I'm gonna copy all the front-end files here, onto the root folder, and then I'm gonna run npm install to install all the models, and then I'm gonna run also npm run build to build my web application. Now let's go to the last stage. So let's use the SDK 7, and then I'm gonna say that the work there is also app. Here in the application, I'm gonna copy from the first stage, which is the backend build here. I'm gonna copy everything in the app out in the root folder, and then I'm gonna copy also from the front end all the dist files. So the dist files are the folder which contain our build files for the front end, and I'm going to copy it into www root folder, which will be the folder that my server will look at for serving static files. Now let's create the entry point for our image. Here I'm gonna choose .NET to execute, and in the second parameter here I'm going to choose server.dll, the DLL file which will be the executable for our server. Let's save this Docker file, and then let's go back to our terminal, and I'm going to build my Docker image here. So I'm gonna say Docker build. I'm gonna choose the tag, so my application with the tag 0.0.1 because it's my first version, and I'm going to say build me all of this. So if we say Docker image ls, we see here that our image was created here, and I'm going to put this image in a container, and we are gonna run it to see if it works on my machine. So I say docker run. Here I'm gonna expose my Docker container in a 8080 port, which will be proxified from the 80 port, which is the default port for my container. And then I'm going to put the name of my container here, my image. Let's now open a web browser. Let's execute our application in 8080 port, and as you see here, our React web application is perfectly served by our server, and the image container works perfectly. Let's now move to the second part, which is deploy this container on Kubernetes using Minikube. So as mentioned before, Minikube should be already installed in your machine. So we have the version 1.32 here. We should start Minikube. So this will create a virtual environment in our Docker, and we should emulate Kubernetes environment directly in our local machine here. Let's now execute this command. This command will let us see our built images with Docker directly in the virtual machine of Minikube. So let's do this, and then we have to build our image with Docker like follow. And now if I do Minikube image ls, I should see my application loaded here and ready to be deployed in Kubernetes. So let's go back to the schema. Here we're going to create a deployment which will deploy our application in 4 pods, and then I'm gonna create a service that will expose these pods to public clients on port 80. Let's now open a terminal, and then I'm going to create a folder called Kubernetes. In this folder I'm going to create 2 config Kubernetes files. The first one will be called my app deployment config.yaml, and the second one will be a service that will expose the application for us. Let's open this with VS Code. Here I have extensions that will create the core of these config files for me. Of course, you can install it here in the extensions. I have installed this extension. So here just I will type deployment, and it will create the deployment file core for me. So my deployment will be my app deployment. And for the image, I'm gonna list all the images available for me, and I'm gonna choose the image that we have created together. So I'm gonna copy and paste it here, and the port will be 80 by default. And here I'm gonna say that I want 4 pods to contain my application. Let's save this file, and then I'm going to create this deployment. So I'm gonna call the kubectl command, and I'm gonna call create, and I'm gonna call this file. So here, as you see, the deployment was created. I'm gonna call kubectl get deployment, And here, as you see, I have my deployment which is running, and the 4 pods are already ready. So if I say kubectl get pods, I see my 4 pods running containing our application. Let's now create a service, go back, and then expose these pods for public clients. So I'm gonna go back to my VS Code here. I'm gonna type Kubernetes service. I'm gonna call it my app service. I'm here, and here I'm gonna choose my deployment. So my deployment file called my app deployment. So I'm gonna make the same here, and the port will be 80 by default. I'm gonna create the service. Let's go to our terminal. kubectl create my app service, and the service was created. So if I say kubectl get service, as you see here, my app service is created, and it is in this cluster with the port 80. And now I'm gonna forward this service to my local host in order to see the application. So I'm gonna say kubectl get service, and then I'm gonna execute kubectl port forward, and then I'm gonna copy and paste the name of the service here, and I'm gonna expose it on port 7080 from the port 80, which is the port for our service. Let's execute this, and now let's go to our web, and if I execute localhost 7080, we see here that our application is working on the port, and it was deployed successfully. So I hope that you liked this video. See you in the next ones. Ciao.